couple of things, then I would love to take your questions. Things that are top of my mind these days, the continuing threat we face from troubled souls radicalized by the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, in two different ways. That group is using social media to try and motivate people to either come to their so-called caliphate, or if you can't come, kill where you are. And that is a siren song, two-pronged siren song that goes out through social media and is a very different model than we faced even 2 years ago. Because it's no longer the case that a terrorist is available through a particular website or a particular email location. Instead, the terrorist is buzzing in the pocket of a troubled soul 24 hours a day through Twitter and Twitter direct messaging. And if they find a real live one, then they'll move them to an encrypted form of communication, which makes life even more difficult for us. And so we have investigations in all 50 states to try to identify among hundreds of people who are consuming this poison, where are they in stages from consuming to acting, and how do we stop them from acting? That is a preoccupation of the Bureau and our partners in state and local law enforcement all day long in all 56 FBI field offices. That remains with us. There's obviously still a traditional Al-Qaeda threat, but what is front of mind today is this crowdsourcing of terrorism that we're facing. Second thing that's on my mind a lot these days, all of us in law enforcement, all of us who follow the media, are seeing a very real, significant increase in violent crime, especially in homicide, in cities all over the United States. It's an increase that is happening in cities that have nothing apparent in common except being American cities, right? Cities like Hartford and Austin, Milwaukee and Tampa, Washington, D.C. and Chicago. Spikes in cities all over the country, spikes tending to occur in hard-hit, poorer neighborhoods, violence involving, in the main, according to chiefs and sheriffs, young men of color. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is going on in the United States? What is going on that explains this map? And what explains that it has happened in the last 9 to 10 months? I don't know the answer, honestly, but I know that we in law enforcement and the media and academia and communities, especially the hardest hit communities, need to understand what's happening here and need to respond, because there are no lives that don't matter in this country. I worry sometimes this is a problem because it's occurring in inner city neighborhoods. A lot of Americans can sort of drive around it mentally. We can't do that. We are at a place with historically low violent crime as a country, right? Lower than before I was born, which I'm depressed to report is 54 years ago, approximately. We are historic low crime. We cannot give that back, or we will have to explain to our children and our grandchildren what we did to squander the work that has been done over the last decades. And so I don't have answers there, but it's something that we are talking about in law enforcement all over the country, so I want to make sure I highlighted it for you. Now, and congratulations on the Bengals, by the way, it's amazing. And so I would be happy to take your questions. Sir.
Just to expound on that, Cincinnati's overall shooting rate is 30-35% higher at this point than it was last year. Homicides haven't, not that much, but we're in that trend. What are you seeing in terms of possible reasons for this, and what can the FBI do, either directly or working with law enforcement on?
Yeah, thank you for that question. There's a number of possible causes, and there may not be one cause. Obviously, just because it's happening in a lot of cities doesn't mean the cause is the same in every city, but it makes us want to at least consider a national perspective. A whole lot of cities, including Cincinnati and Columbus, are dealing with an epidemic, a wave of highly pure heroin, cheap heroin that's coming into this country from Mexico and driving an explosion in the number of overdoses and the trafficking involving heroin. That's a possibility. Second, a whole lot of police departments are shorthanded and have been hit very hard by budget cuts over recent years, so they're having to respond to epidemics like that with fewer people. A number of chiefs have suggested to me, not here, but have suggested to me elsewhere, that a lot of people are coming out of jail who were put in jail over the last decade or so to try and achieve the low violent crime we have today. I don't know whether that's a cause or not. And then one that we're obviously all staring at is there something about the YouTube era in which we sit that is chilling law enforcement in some way, that is driving a change in behavior that's impacting violent crime? I don't know whether that's the case. It's been suggested to me, but I think given the stakes here, we have to consider all possible causes. Now, to the FBI piece. Obviously, the response to violent crime is a local responsibility, but we have an ability and a responsibility to try and contribute in a number of ways. First, with our task forces, our violent crime task forces around the country, we're trying to make an impact, especially on the organized groups and the gangs that are engaged in violence. We're trying also to offer technical resources and our analytic resources. We have a lot of smart people that we have developed since 9/11 who think extremely well about the terrorism threat, our intelligence analysts. We're looking to try and bring more of those folks to bear against problems like this to help our partners think through it in a way that might make them more effective.
Director, I'm curious, we've recently seen a spate of bomb threats. It's a pretty localized issue. Of course, the situation in EKU where they shut down classes last week. What can the FBI do on that front? What can you say about what's happening here? This concept of swatting, where sometimes they'll call to get a SWAT team. This is new to me. What's your take on that?
Yeah. There's a number of what I'd call sort of fads, but to call them fads maybe isn't serious enough, that I see probably three. One is you see bomb threats become popular in different areas of the country. Swatting, which is the reporting of a violent incident at someone's home, hoping that the police will respond in mass and humiliate or embarrass the person. And the third is the idiotic use of lasers against aircrafts, which is not just idiotic, it is potentially catastrophic. The answer on all three of those fronts is we got to take that very seriously and really lock some people up who do that and give them a long stretch in jail, because people, especially young people, need to know this is not any kind of game. Plenty of pranks you can pull as a youngster. A bomb threat, a swatting, or aiming a laser at an aircraft are not among them. And if you do that, you're going to actually ruin your entire life.
You mentioned earlier about heroin being something that's on the radar. Where is heroin on your list of things to do, and what's your strategy for dealing with that epidemic that's
Yeah. Obviously, drugs is the primary responsibility of our partners at the Drug Enforcement Administration at the federal level. The Bureau's piece of that is, first we try and focus on an international basis on the international organized criminal groups that are trafficking in heroin. So a piece of the national strategy is disrupt those. Because here's what's going on. The Mexican traffickers are now growing opium poppies and refining it to heroin in Mexico, which allows them very cheap and short transportation routes into the United States. So at the national level, we, working with the Mexicans, have to disrupt that production and that transportation. That's a big part of what the FBI does. Locally, what we're trying to do is ask our local partners in state and local law enforcement, how can we help you? How can we think we are best working on the organized criminal groups in your community, but are there other ways we could help you? And that's going to be different all around the country. Obviously, there's a big part of this that is beyond the Bureau, that is education and treatment that has to be a part of this, especially because of the way the plague's affecting kids.
You hope there's an end?
Say again?
You hope there's an end in sight for this?
Yeah, I don't see of course I hope, I don't see an end in sight, frankly, because the economics of it so far are very powerful, right? What the Mexican traffickers are doing is gaining market share with highly pure, cheap heroin, and it's becoming a transition point for kids who would otherwise abuse prescription medications. Heroin is as available, it's cheaper than buying pills on the street, so why not use it? And of course the consequences are devastating.
Yeah, in terms of one point of crowdsourcing terrorism, we had one of those lost souls, Christopher Cornell, last year, who hooked up with people from ISIL on the internet and planned to bomb the Capitol building. So how many of those conversations are going on, do you think, online, and how do we stop people like this?
Those are hard questions. I don't know for sure how many are going on. There are hundreds. Well, I'll give you some scale. ISIL has more than 25,000 English language followers on Twitter. So if you think about English language countries, it's a fair bet thousands of them are in the United States. So that means probably a fair estimate would be there are hundreds of conversations going on between people in some stage between consuming and acting. We know we have investigations in all 50 states, so it is a widespread problem. And your second question was what to do about it?
Yeah.
We are working very hard to identify these people and disrupt them. Now, some of them may be troubled people who need mental health care. Great, we'll get them off to that early. But the rest of them, we just have to send very tough messages that this is not a game. That if we catch you doing this, you're going to get a very long stretch in jail, either for going to be with ISIL or offering to and attempting to act on their violent poison here in the United States. And again, there's a danger that I'm falling in love with my own hope, but I think that's starting to take root. That people understand, first of all, the caliphate is a nightmare. For a woman, it's a living hell. For men, you're going to be suicide bomb fodder. And here in the United States, if you get caught messing with them, you are going to jail for a very long stretch. It is not worth it. And I'm optimistic that those two counter messages are starting to make a difference. But we still have hundreds of these investigations.
Let's talk real quick about advice for parents in the digital age. You mentioned the YouTube generation. We've seen some cases locally, Facebook enticement cases. I know the sex trafficking is a big deal, but these are cases where people are using social media, young men in particular it seems, to try to entice girls to be a part of this network and to do things they shouldn't do. That is happening. What role does the FBI play on that front?
Well, a lot of different roles. We do a lot of investigating and locking people up to fight sex trafficking and cyber stalking and all kinds of things. So that's our enforcement piece. Growing out of that, we have a message for parents, which is the internet is the world. You would not let your children wander around at night in a mall, in a town, in a city without knowing where they're going, who is with them. When you let them onto the internet, they're wandering around the entire world without you knowing where they're going. There are a lot of great people in this world. There are a lot of bad, sick people in this world. They're all out there, and they're all looking to get to know innocent souls on the internet, know where they're going, and have a sense of what's going on.